want to give that boy or that girl a punch, punish him or her. And that is anger in us. And that anger is a kind of mud. It could smear everything. So we need to be aware that that mud of anger we have to handle. But without the mud, we cannot grow lotus flowers. So the mud is useful somehow. So your anger is useful somehow. So maybe you should not get it out. You should not throw it away. If you know how to make good use of your anger, you can grow the lotus of peace, of joy, of forgiveness. And if we look deeply, we listen deeply, we'll be able to understand. And when we understand, there is love. And when there is love, anger just transforms itself.
Anger can transform. Welcome to MomTalk, everyone. Today's show is very, very special. We're here to talk about conscious living with a dear friend who not only practices conscious living every day, she's also taken it upon herself to be an activist and an educator and a social learning promoter, and every day thinks about intentionally how to cultivate peace learning, consciousness, and how to help families live better lives with more happiness. And so it is my great pleasure to have with me today to MomTalk and carry on this conversation about anger, managing anger, reducing anger, and that's the flip side of peace learning, isn't it? So we're gonna flip the coin and talk about bullying and talk about this bullying behavior, talk about schools and how kids are facing bullying and what we can do as individuals, as parents, as educators, and as responsible members of societies and communities to bring more peace and cultivate more peace and cultivate more character in our lives. Welcome, Aarti, to this show and MomTalk.
Thank you so much, Nelly. It is my pleasure to be here.
It's
really
a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
So, you and I met at the Center for Spiritual Living a couple years ago, and I remember at the time thinking, because there were a lot of parents, we were there for Dr. Shefali's book signing. She was giving a talk on the awakened families and just raising conscious living within families. And I remember just witnessing your passion and how focused and intentional you were in bringing this conscious living work not just to schools, but also inside the homes and families and communities. And that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, I say that this conscious parenting movement under Dr. Shefali has truly not just changed my life, it has transformed my life, but now I'm realizing more and more it has saved my life. So the message I've received from Dr. Shefali's conscious parenting movement, that she has so beautifully, where she's so beautifully created a tribe of conscious parenting, conscious teaching. We live it, breathe it, we own it. It is in our cells now. So how could we not bring this message to the masses, starting in our homes, our interpersonal relationships with the children in our life, our intimate partners, our families, and now our profession? professions. You're in the mental health field, I'm in the education field. How could we not? So it really was a journey of alignment and congruency for me, that I couldn't do this any other way other than conscious parenting, conscious living, and now conscious teaching.
Beautiful. And we know the key to mental health, wellness, and well-being and raising consciousness is integration. So when you say that you have been able to cultivate congruency and integration and become one from the inside out with this message of conscious living, it makes perfect sense.
Again, for me, what made sense was that this is the only way I can live. Because I didn't, I was living in survival mode up until I came into the Evolve Conscious Parenting movement in December of 2015, so just nearly 2 years ago. And it became so clear to me that this is what I've been seeking all along. Dr. Shefali's message, the permission she gave us to break free from the old patterns of our cultural conditioning that don't serve us anymore, not in the parent-child relationship as, parents of young children or co-parents of young children, but even in our adult and parent relationships. That is where it really spoke to me. And I knew I had to create for myself a conscious education, conscious teaching. I had to reinvent my profession around it. And so this is just a metamorphosis out of that.
Wonderful. That's beautiful. And I know personally, I have to say, when I do take those conscious steps to let go some of the boundaries or some of the labels that are creating stress and tension and competition, some of the negativity that we are conditioned, whether we like it or not. It's part of our heritage, our epigenetics, our conditioning. When we become aware of the awareness and conscious of the consciousness, and we're able to let go some of those labels and boundaries, it's really liberating. You feel immediate peace, a sense of immediate just bliss and balance and equilibrium and harmony. So let's talk about some of those labels as it relates to the topic of bullying, the bullying behavior, raising our children to become more peaceful, to cultivate more peace, and to cultivate character within our families.
Right. So, character is everything. And unfortunately, character isn't taught in schools. Character is only taught in the home. Well, where does character get started being taught in the home? Between the parent and child relationship. That is where it begins, and that is where it ends. And that is what we've learned in the conscious teaching and conscious parenting movement. So then it translates into our interpersonal relationships with the partner with whom we are co-parenting children with. And that is where I came into this movement. I was co-parenting my partner's 2 twin children at the time, and it had been over 2 years that I've been doing that. And no one gave me a manual. No one taught me how to co-parent someone else's children. So I had to learn it on the fly. Well, I was doing it for 2 years. And then just something, whenever within families there's a difference between how children should be raised, that is exactly when one has to raise the awareness of their own parenting, how they were conditioned, how they were parented, in order to parent this child from a conscious perspective and a conscious approach versus an unconscious one. So that is where I learned. I mean, that evolved.
Let's define consciousness or conscious living versus when we're reacting and living without consciousness. I think that's an important first step for viewers.
So living from an unconscious state is when you are living from cultural conditioning of so many different kinds.
For example,
how we were brought up in our own family unit, in our own family of origin. Whether we were brought up here in the United States, we have a certain cultural conditioning that is the American way. Now, add to that if we belong to another ethnic group, such as I am Indian from India, my parents are first generation, I am second generation, you are Persian, originating from Iran, we now have an additional cultural conditioning that is from an ethnic standpoint. So now what we've got is we've got a clash between the American cultural conditioning, the Indian cultural conditioning, at least for me, and how your family of origin chooses to raise you. That is where it all begins. And then that carries over into the schools that we send our kids to and the schools that we grew up in and that we went to.
And I would add to this, there's a macro level of culture and there's a micro level of culture. So as you become acculturated and assimilated, this morning I had a personal, experience that I will share. So it's Halloween, it's the Halloween parade. It's supposed to be this big, big deal for kids at school. They get all dressed up, fancy costumes, some more fancy than others. And there is this energy of wanting to, look your best and have a really nice costume on. And so my daughter had decided that she was gonna this year dress, low key in her gymnastics clothes and just be a gymnast. Nice. And so she had like a couple other fancier costumes that would probably look very nice and she would shine in the crowd. But so I had that sort of drive or this moving towards, trying to encourage her to go with the fancier costume, right? My own projection that because I want her to shine. Of course, there are children, we want them to look good and shine and, stand out.
Right.
I had to catch myself. It's almost like I have this conscious coach, sitting on my
your conscience.
On my exactly. Like Mom, you're not. It's her choice. Right. It's her living. This is what she wants. This is what she feels happy. This is her sweet spot. And so zip it. Like I literally had to. I'm going to be happy for her. I'm going to try to see it through her eyes. I'm going to celebrate her joy and not judge and practice self-compassion. So it's very subtle. Sometimes it creeps upon you in a very subtle ways. And you have to constantly be aware and conscious and let go and just let your children evolve. And you know what? When we're not pushing our own sort of projections, agendas,
it's really our own agenda.
It actually cultivates a lot more peace than you think. Because many times our own agenda is based on that
all the layers of cultural conditioning and what's right and what's not, and lack. And if you don't do it, then somehow your daughter is lacking. I mean, at least this is what your subconscious is telling you, that if she doesn't wear the costume you want her to wear, she is somehow going to be lacking today in how she stands out and shows up in her Halloween costume with the rest of her friends and at school.
That's exactly what it felt like.
In her mind, she is the star. As a gymnast, a simple gymnast, and that is enough for her.
Yeah.
Somehow we project she's not enough.
And also, when I had an opportunity to have a conversation with her, she said, "Mom, this is what feels comfortable, and this is where I am, and I don't want to be, the shining star." Right?
You said a really key word, Nelly, and that is something that I have picked up on as the whole reason why we have bullying in schools, why there's such a rampant cyberbullying, why there's even, that unconsciousness happening in our homes between family dynamics, between our family relationships, and even the parent-child relationship, and even the student and teacher relationship. What it comes down to is comfort. Am I feeling comfortable doing this or not? Do I feel comfortable with you telling me what I should and shouldn't do, or does it feel uncomfortable to me? And that can be the beginnings and is the beginnings typically of bullying. When children's voices are silenced in the home, then they get silenced at school. When the child in general, when their spirit is not honored within the safety of the parent-child relationship or the safety of their family home or their family unit, then that is going to carry on into school.
So
in every other dynamic.
So in other words, parents who are overpowering, over dominating, parents who are pushing their own agendas,
Yes,
parents who are
absolutely.
competitive amongst themselves and like to be the top dog or be on top or win the race or be number one. So those types of thinking or value system or projections are actually cultivating bullying and the bullying behavior. So that's a good mental note to carry on, in that when we're encouraging our children not to be number ones and not to shine and not to stand out and not to be the best,
chasing those certificates and diplomas and degrees and honors and all the chase. It's the chase. It's
we're
so
cultivating peace and peace learning within their communities and within their friendships.
That's so important.
Right?
Right.
So step one, take a deep breath and just allow your children to grow and to find their voice and to find who they are without your projections. I mean, that's something big that I consciously and intentionally practice, and I reinforce and encourage not just my husband, not just our extended family members, but also our friends and all the parents who are within our vicinity and community to step into that sweet zone and to cultivate peace that way. So we all have to relax, and we do live in a very competitive community. So, and I know in Orange County is the same.
Absolutely.
Parents want their kids to succeed, but perhaps we can take a step back and redefine success. So if my child is number one, that makes your child number two, and the other child number three. And so how are those kids feeling in number 2, 3, and 4 positions, right? So when you're intentional about, well, you know, it's really good to find your sweet spot. And yes, you want to do your best, but think of it as a marathon.
Yeah.
It's infinite. Everyone can be successful and win and reach their sweet spot. And it's about cultivating happiness and peace more than cultivating success in an achievement-oriented sort of way. Right.
And I think that you said your description, your comparison is so key, so important. Marathon. We have become part of this competitive, we call it dog-eat-dog competitive world. You call it a marathon. Well, marathon requires training. And marathon runners also know how much damage they're creating to their body when they're training, but then they train so that they can minimize the damage, so that they can keep running marathons. But at the end of the marathon, there is some reward that has to be an internal reward versus an outer reward. So when we're talking conscious parenting, conscious teaching, are we doing it for the external reward for our children, or is it the internal reward for ourselves? Or is it an external reward for us as parents and adults and teachers, that are we getting the medal, or are we deriving some internal satisfaction for our child? Is our child internally happy doing so? Now, when running a marathon, doing this marathon competitiveness, we have to ask ourselves, how much damage are we causing along the way? For ourselves, for our children, for our students, and how much damage is being caused because of this institutionalized learning and way of operating, which is so unconscious. When we're coming, adults and parents and teachers and schools and leadership is coming from a certain agenda, and that is it. It is that square peg. It is that square or that circle that has to fit in the circle hole. If you're a square peg or any other different shape, well, you're just going to have to be shoved into that. And that is where we have to really look at the beginnings of bullying. And we also have to look at our own negative self-talk, which I would like to call self-bullying. Have we become self-bullies? That we have become so unconscious within ourselves that we are now projecting it onto our children in our parenting and becoming bullies to them? Are we becoming bullies within our family units and families of origin? And are we becoming bullies at school in the teacher and student dynamic? Or are you being bullied by your leadership, by your boss, in the institution that you're either working or teaching in? So we really have to talk about this global unconsciousness that starts in our homes and in our families, and it transcends to other parts of our life, our schooling, our education, and then society. Have we become perpetual bullies by being unconscious, unawakened beings? That's the question, I think.
So raising awareness, again, from the inside out process. How are we communicating as individuals? And we know that the nonviolent type of communication is based on needs, identifying needs, and satisfying needs. So if we're getting really good and skilled at nonviolent communication, we should be really good listeners. We should be able to observe without judgment. We should be able to identify needs quickly and to assess for solutions or ways that we can help either cultivate more strength or more abilities or more growth within that relationship. So taking the mindfulness position and usually practicing, deep breaths, connecting to the inner core, just observing the tension or the anger. These are conversations that we can have with our children. I had this conversation last night with my daughter at bedtime. And she asked, why do you think so-and-so sometimes, is too mean to me? And so we had to unpack, what did that mean to her? What does it mean to her? And so she described mean as, she'll ignore me. This is a friend, she'll ignore me. If I go up to her, she turns her back on me. If I try to engage in a conversation, she runs away and dismisses me. So these are ways, subtle ways, covert ways that our children communicate aggression. And so I had to unpack it for her to help her understand why someone might be or behave in a way that has more aggression. And usually, if you think of it, human beings, if our needs are met, if our basic needs are met, we are peaceful and peace-loving and peace-learning individuals. So if someone is not being peaceful and happy and joyful and living with joy, then that's an indication that some needs are not being met. Whether they're tired or whether they're hungry or whether they're jealous and feeling, lack of competency or lack of mastery, or whether they're feeling a lack of something within the family, whatever those reasons, it projects on, it shows up as aggressive behavior. And sometimes it's relational aggression, sometimes it's microaggression, and sometimes it's just mean aggression, which is usually labeled as the bullying behavior, or someone who's bullying. So helping our children understand this continuum of aggression, aggressive behavior, internally and externally. So I also tie it in when I'm talking to my daughter to, well, can you think of times when you're feeling that way? And then she got it. She's like, oh yeah, when I didn't get a good night's sleep, I was kind of moody and irritable the next day. I said, yep. And that's how you cultivate empathy. You say, okay, so this is what's happening with your friend, maybe.
And I'm going to piggyback on what you said is, ask your child what's happening at home. That is, you just want to peel back those layers again and again and again. Keep going until you get to where your child feels comfortable speaking to you about what it is, what challenge they're feeling inside, or what is their unmet need inside. So Susie Lula said it so beautifully on her show with bullying. She hit the nail on the head when she said, look at the behavior. Bullying is behavior. It is not the person. You have to see what is the behavior and that there is an underlying unmet need under that behavior.
Right on.
Well, now we need to peel back the layers of what's going on at school. So in one of the Taboo Topic Tuesdays, Facebook Live talk shows that I've started, if you go to my page, you can see those. In the second episode, episode 2, I did a whole statistics show on social media cyberbullying that kids are experiencing nowadays and how that is translating into real life. And the challenge that we as parents and teachers and adults are facing now in our world is, how do we bridge this bullying that's happening on social media with real life bullying? How do we peel back the layers to see what the root of that bullying is and why it's happening on social media? Why is it happening in person? How can we mitigate the risk that's building up to where our children and our students, we can avoid them being seriously hurt? 3/4, this was a staggering statistic, 3/4, that would be 75, nearly 75% of girls are affected by the images posted on Instagram, which then leads them to self-injurious behaviors such as eating disorders, cutting, and other self-injurious, actions that they engage in. And we need to pay attention to what's going on with cyberbullying, especially with our girls, and how bullying is manifesting itself differently with our children and students. And so I implore parents and teachers to ask, what is going on at school? Is there a child that's bothering you? Did something happen with one of your teachers? Did something happen with one of the administrators? Did something happen on the playground? Did something happen in the bathroom? These are questions parents and teachers, I really especially implore teachers and school leaders to ask these questions. What is going on? And it is our responsibility, like Dr. Shefali says, and like Susie said so beautifully, it is our responsibility as parents, teachers, adults to create the comfortable conditions for our children and students to feel comfortable to come to us so we can nip bullying in at the root cause.
Beautiful. So when you have secure attachment, when you have a good relationship, when you're connected at the heart and soul with your child, it is easier for your child to open up, and it's easier for your child to, on their daily conversations, engage you and invite you into their worlds. And I think it's a nice balancing act for especially us as parents to find that sweet spot again, to allow autonomy, to allow a free range where they can grow and experience growth independently and to evolve on their own without our interferences, but also to be close enough in proximity so that they can open up and they can share their soulful conversations as it relates to their hurts, their suffering, as well as their joy in schools. And what I love about Aarti and Aarti's mission is that she has partnered up with schools. She has taken upon herself this responsibility, social responsibility, conscious living responsibility, to partner up with parents and schools to create that sweet spot and awareness and awakening and consciousness for these families so that they can have better communications, they can create more peace learning and cultivate more character and peace learning within their communities. And I know that, Aarti, your practice or your work is mainly heavily focused in the Orange County area, but you've also started this online webinar classes. So there is a global outreach here, opportunity.
Absolutely.
If you're watching from the Middle East, all the way from Europe or Canada, and you're interested to learn from Aarti and what you can do to be empowered as a parent and as an educator, as just an auntie or someone who works with children, then you can tune in to Aarti's webinars and her work and connect with her. She's on social media, on Facebook. I will put up all of Aarti's work on MomTalk LA on our website, as well as other social media outlets, so that you can connect with her, you can reach out, and you can get help. She's here to help you. She's here to cultivate conscious living and to cultivate peace. And she's doing it. She's actively pursuing this mission, which I love. And so heartwarming, to have you here and
Thank
to have this conversation.
Well, you have inspired me, and being on this show, I realize what a responsibility you have taken upon yourself to educate your audience and your viewers on not just the importance of peace, learning, living, but actively giving them tools by showing them this is how we do it. And you are not afraid to speak up about your own challenges and your own experiences with your children. And that is what I love about you, Nelly, because you put yourself out there. It is so important for us as parents, co-parents, teachers to practice what we preach. If we are not practicing what we're preaching, we cannot deliver our message effectively. So I couldn't have come into this conscious parenting movement under Dr. Shefali if I wasn't a co-parent myself. So I've co-parented 2 beautiful children, a twin boy and girl, for the last 4 years, and I've seen their evolution, and I've seen, they are sovereign spirits, like Dr. Shefali says. They are their true own living, breathing, sovereign, bright spirit. And it is our responsibility to not dim their light.
Yeah.
Well, then this movement also took me to my teaching days. I've been in the field of special education, either as a teacher or a tutor, mentor, coach, educational therapist for nearly 23 years in the Orange County area. But coming into this movement, like I said, completely transformed my life and my professional mission. But it started with me changing my own and transforming my own personal life and my own dynamics in the co-parenting I was doing with the 2 kids I was co-parenting. So what I've actually started, what Nelly was referencing, is I've renamed my organization called the Metamorphosis League, Conscious Education and Advocacy, because that is exactly what it is and what it will do. And I am partnering up with various professionals in the Indian, South Asian, Persian, Middle Eastern community, and any community of color and diversity, where in our cultures we have been conditioned that these mental health topics, these special needs topics, special education, disabilities, these are taboo, stigma, shame-ridden topics that we should not be talking about and that we should not be opening up about. And you have given and you deliver your message in such a beautiful platform here to your viewers that you've inspired me.
Thank you.
To reach out to not just your audience and viewership, but even mine and whoever is getting this message, that we have got to learn to become better parent advocates, better teacher advocates, and we need to educate ourselves. Well, what does education look like? We have to take classes. It is continuing education. So I've started a 5-class webinar series for special education, parent, and school advocacy.
Yeah, now describe special education to some of our viewers that may not be clear. So when you say special education, who are you serving?
So when I say special education, I'm talking about any child who has an academic challenge, behavioral challenge, is at risk.
So learning disabilities, dyslexia,
ADHD, autism is so huge now, such a huge population where so many kids are being identified. And this is cross-cultural, cross-global. One in what this Center for Disease Control says, their statistics say that 1 in 68 children is being identified and diagnosed as having autism or on the autism spectrum disorder.
Yeah.
However, if you look at real life numbers, when you go to conferences, when you look at the research, it is actually closer to like 1 in 45 for boys. Boys are heavily represented, and this is a cross-global, cross-cultural phenomenon. Now, people from cultures such as ours, the Indian, the Middle Eastern, the Persian, the South Asian, we don't know, first we don't know what these disabilities and conditions are, so we have to educate ourselves on what they are. Second, we then have to be able to send our children to schools where they will be served with appropriate school services to meet their needs for whatever condition they've been diagnosed with. Now, in the United States, under the U.S. federal law, there are 2 laws in particular that protect the rights of students and children with special needs and disabilities. One is called IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and that is a federal education law. There's a second law, which is under the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's under the Office of Civil Rights. So it's trying to meet it addresses the needs of individuals with disabilities under a more global federal law. So I'm a special education advocate and consultant. And so what I do is I teach parents on how to be educated on the basics of these two laws, the Individuals with Disability Education Act and the Office of Civil Rights Americans with Disability Act. And this is available to all Americans regardless of where they are in the world and if their children are attending an American school. This goes also for military families who are on American bases. Now, how many Americans are educated in the law? So this 5-webinar series is meant to educate parents on just the basics of these federal laws that protect the rights of children with special needs and the education of children with special needs. And it goes all the way up till age 22. Do most Americans know this? Do people of our cultural background know this? Are we aware? And so education is key. Now you need to, okay, you have a child with disabilities, you have a child with mental health issues, such as anxiety, depression, major depressive disorder, ADHD with hyperactivity, impulsivity, dyslexia, mental retardation, intellectual disabilities, Down syndrome. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But what I'm here to educate sort of the American masses on is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and in a quick 5-class webinar series, how you can become a better parent advocate. How do you write letters, powerful letters to the school and to the district to advocate in a collaborative, non-adversarial way to secure appropriate public education services. This is such a confusing place to navigate, the school system and school services. So I have embarked on this venture to educate parents on school services. This also goes for parents, American parents who send their children to private schools, because what parents don't know is that even private school students are eligible to receive free and appropriate public education evaluations from public schools. So I really encourage all to join my 5-webinar series on how to become a better parent advocate with school services. And I will walk you through what are the differences also between an advocate and an attorney. And how do you gather your financial resources to meet the needs of your special needs child, both in the home and at school, where you are not overextending yourselves? What are the reasonable advocacy services that parents can and should tap into, and when is the right time to get an attorney involved? And this is where I've actually also partnered up with some attorneys and related mental health professionals and related therapy professionals in the world of special education. So this is my mission. My classes begin in the middle of November. All the links are on my Facebook public profile page, the Metamorphosis League Conscious Education and Advocacy. And Metamorphosis is spelled METAMORPHOSYS, because we really have to create systemic transformation and change, but it starts one parent at a time, and it starts with one school meeting at a time. And I am here as my mission to teach you and walk you through this roadmap through my 5-webinar series.
Wow, what an outstanding peace learning leadership that you bring to our community. And
it's needed. Our community needs it.
It's an honor. Yes, our community needs it. Yeah. You need it. Yes. So if your child has any sort of learning issues or learning usually learning with different abilities, yes, we like to call them.
Different abilities.
Different
yes.
abilities. You want to know your rights. You want to become knowledgeable and informed about your rights. And so Aarti's job is to empower you. Right. Empowering parents who are dealing with children who don't have the right social skills, they don't have the right communication skills. Sometimes these children are a target of aggression and aggressive behavior, oftentimes they are. And so for us to be aware and to empower our children, equip them with the right tools, the right nurturance, the right cultivation of peace and peace learning is our duty, is our responsibility. Yes. And so, just connect, and let's build this connected community together. Absolutely. We are really connected from the heart with this conscious living and this mission is very, very dear to all of us.
Yes.
And it's really heartwarming. It's great that we are able to have this conversation, this very important mom talk here today.
Thank you. This is such an important message you're bringing, and it's time to now empower parents when it comes to schools, because oftentimes what I come across as an advocate and a consultant is parents are feeling bullied by the schools.
Right.
So in talking about bullying, now parents are like, well, how do we navigate being bullied ourselves by the general school system? And this isn't to disparage all schools. Not all schools are bad. You know, you really covered all bases with we do the best that we can with what tools we've been given, but we can always do better. We can let go of our old agenda that doesn't serve ourselves or our children or our students anymore, and we can really tap into a new way of learning and educating ourselves.
And like we start the show, oftentimes it's that anger that can transform us. So if we're feeling frustrated and angry as a parent because we've been to the principal's office 10 times and they've dismissed it, they are not taking action, they're not being responsive, then allow that anger to sit, to cultivate, to grow, so that it becomes the lotus, the beautiful evolution of consciousness. So maybe then it's my opportunity, or my journey to then become an advocate and to find someone like Aarti and to partner up with her and to find my voice in other ways and other types of partnerships. Because schools are also oftentimes, there is lack of communication because of limited resources, because of having too many kids to look after.
And inner city schools do well if they can. Teachers do well if they can.
Yeah, they want to help.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Administrators do well if they can, but we as parents and responsible adults have to realize that you absolutely hit the nail on the head too, that schools have limited resources. Leadership has limited resources, whether it's time or whether it's even training. Training is so key.
Yes.
You have to look at, well, what is the training? What is their background experience? Are they, is it just the school culture? Is it the district culture? You have to look at the culture if you really want to address bullying at every level and you want to empower yourself as a parent and a child and an adult or a teacher or a leader at the school level, you have to look at, well, let's look at the education, let's look at the training, let's look at the background, let's look at where our own unmet needs are as teachers and school leaders in schools and districts. Schools do well if they can, teachers do well if they can, students do well if they can.
Right.
And aides, a lot of the paraprofessionals, they're the unsung heroes, one-to-one aides who work with children with autism or who work with medically fragile children, children in wheelchairs, children in inner city schools, children in gang-ridden neighborhoods and gang-ridden schools. I mean, schools often are the oasis in the desert of unconsciousness when it comes to, schools. I taught at an inner city school in Orange County for 9+ years, almost 10 years. And that is where I learned that students just want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to feel like they matter and that their needs are being met.
So parents, you busy parents who are so busy doing such great work, take a pause, take a moment, and cultivate peace by being present with your child, by taking that opportunity to connect, to be responsive to if they're acting out or if they're not listening, it's most likely that they are missing your connection. And so it starts from home, from me, from inside the house. And if you cultivate that peace and that compassion and that self-compassion from home, guess what? You are handing out a child who's full, who's able to cultivate empathy and peace outside of home. And they have better tolerance in dealing with the aggression that is coming their way. So it starts from the home environment, from the inside out, and then also talk about leadership. how your children can be leaders in cultivating peace and compassion and self-compassion and self-care. So we're not just modeling through our own conscious living to our children and cultivating peace and compassion, but we're also holding our children, our kids responsible. It's that conscious effort, that intentional effort to have expectations for them to go out there and now try and reciprocate and pass and cultivate their own compassion and self-compassion with their relationships. And oftentimes I think when as parents we have high expectations for compassion and peace, we're more likely to get the results will be in our favor in the sweet spot. I always tell our children or my child, I say, find your sweet spot. It's okay to mess up. We all mess up. I mess up every single day. But find your sweet spot, and I put it in terms of numbers because it's easier for them to keep a thermometer or engage in numbers. And I say, okay, so think of it as, are you an 80-20 kind of girl or boy? What's your sweet spot? The 80% or the 70% is the effort and energy you're going to put on cultivating peace learning, compassion, self-care, and doing good in this world. And there is room for error. We all make mistakes. So go for it. I give him that 20% or that 30% to be messy, mess it up, be aggressive, get in there, learn from those opportunities, and then let's talk about it. Bring it back so we can learn from it and have peace learning that is meaningful. And I do this myself every day. I allow myself room for error, as we all do.
Yeah.
And I think it cultivates self-compassion. It allows you to be self-compassionate and not such a bully to yourself.
That self-bullying term just kind of popped into my head.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, and it just I sat with it, and it resonated within me. It really, touched something deep in me that, wow, we are so hard on ourselves, which then in turn can lead us to be so hard on our children and our students. And so how are we navigating our own inner self-talk? And let's not be self-bullies. Let's really watch our own internal landscape. Let's cultivate peace learning for ourselves, like your beautiful message, Nelly. I love it so much. And let's cultivate the positive self-talk, which then will be projected and automatically come out with our with our children and our students.
Awesome. Practice
be
gratitude. Yeah. Be the lotus. Be the
Yes,
lotus. Visualize it. Feel your anger. Manage your anger. Cultivate it in a way that is meaningful. So you're just observing it, you're managing it, you're being the mud to the lotus, right? The mud, it's stable. It's not out there, right? You're not throwing mud, you're just holding the mud within so that the mud can cultivate and turn into this beautiful lotus that is a reflection of growth, beauty, and light. And so if you can take a moment to pause, connect internally, and just allow this show and what we talked about, the words, to just come into your psyche, come into your consciousness, and allow yourself to just sit with it and be kind to yourself. We are human beings. We're very likely to be imperfect, and we need to remind ourselves and our children and to cultivate peace every day in and out. Aarti, thank you for joining us today on MomTalk.
Thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure. And, this is really about conscious education. It's about removing our mask.
Yep,
Even though
that's
it's
right.
Halloween.
Remove your mask.
Remove our mask.
Until next time, everyone.
And let's put on clarified lens of peace living.
Tune in into your peace living.
And conscious living. Thank you. Thank you, Nelly.
Thank you. All right.